Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Why Is This a Podcast? I am your host, Kerean Watts. Lovely to have you here with me, virtually, of course. It's my final episode of 2020. Um, it's been an incredible experience to conduct these interviews with so many people talking about so many different topics. I'm really excited about my final episode of the year with a guest I'm thrilled to have, and I'll introduce him to you in just a moment. Before I do just want to touch on the fact that 2020 has been terrible. Historians will remember this year as the year that we wish we could forget. And many people have, of course, suffered as a result of the COVID 19 pandemic. And it's not been a joy to live through. But I do have this sentiment that during the worst of our experience, it can bring out the best of us. And we have seen that in the frontline workers in healthcare settings, and beyond that. We have seen their dedication and their courage, and they deserve our praise and they deserve our gratitude. And we've also seen the remarkable efforts of scientists and researchers and volunteers in clinical trials for a COVID 19 vaccine, and so much more. There are so many people who have made what for many will be the worst year of their lives an example of how we can be at our best. So I just want to issue, for want of a better expression, a call to action, because there are so many people who do incredible work with the most vulnerable. I made a decision recently to uh, begin donating to a charity close to my heart called Shelter Cymru. It's a charity that supports the homeless in Wales, where I'm from. And I made that decision because I thought I'm lucky enough to have the means to do so. I know that many of you watching um, may not have the means to do that. But if you can, I just want to say before I crack on with this show, and it's a great show, I promise you. If you can, contribute to a cause that you care about, especially now. In this moment, we're at our best when we are together. So if you can donate to a cause, please do. And if you can't donate, if you're not in the position to donate, obviously that's fine. This year has been hard on us all. But I give you my love. I give you my wishes for a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And hopefully a new year that isn't like 2020, the year that experts described as shit. But if it brings you any joy at all, I'm going to give you this: a great show My guest tonight is a freelance journalist. Please welcome the great Mr. Nick Witts. Hello, Nick Witts.
Thank you, Kerean. I think many would echo the sentiments about 2020. Been a turbulent roller coaster of a year, mainly downhill.
Absolutely. As I said,
yeah, I think everyone will echo those sentiments.
Yeah, it's. I thought I would echo my own internal monologue that says to me, "Give money to charity, you selfish prick." And I thought, yeah, fair enough, I'll do that. Okay.
That's gonna be annoying.
No, it's an interesting year in the sense that it's one of those ones where you realize how vulnerable people are when it's ripped away. It's kind of because it wasn't overnight, but it kind of felt like overnight. And then I realized, like me myself, what was ripped away from me was the fact that the pubs had to shut. And I was like, and then I'm there thinking, like, there are people whose incomes have gone and who are facing eviction. And so, that was it. But I'm glad you appreciate the monologue.
No, it was. I think it hit the nail on the head, to be honest.
And I hope the viewers appreciate it too. And
perfect introduction.
Thank you. And I hope that they like and subscribe. And please do. I just want to be loved. Nick, it's lovely to have you. Thank you for being here.
No, absolutely. I'm very grateful as well myself, to be honest.
As I said, you're my final guest of the year. It's quite odd. I'm recording this before Christmas. But actually, I'm recording it after the Christmas special that I did. And this will probably go out after Christmas. But nonetheless, are you feeling festive?
I started festive, and then it sort of ebbed away. But that said, I did watch Ebenezer Scrooge, and that sort of brought it back a bit yesterday. So
Ebenezer Scrooge, famously a festive Christmas character.
Exactly. But for some reason, it has reignited the small embers of festivity I have for this Christmas period that will possibly be forgotten after this year. Let's be honest.
We'll go on to a little festive quiz later on. But first of all, obviously, as I said, you're a freelance journalist with an interest very similar to my own in health, the environment, all the topics that make you very fun at parties. So I just did want to ask you before we get into that, why did you decide to go into writing? Because it doesn't pay well.
It doesn't. I found that out after I'd already decided. So my original plans for writing and sort of going down that as a career route was sports journalism. That just because 9/10 of young boys probably like football and just want to write about it, which was exactly my thought process. So I came out of school, went into college, did Lit Lang A level, thought this is the way I'm going to do it. So I combined that then and just sort of started to pick up more and more work experience and sort of build a portfolio. But the intentions early on were always sports journalism. I was steadfast that that'd be the way. Turned out not to be.
Because you've now gravitated towards health and the environment.
Yeah, exactly.
How did that transition happen?
Well, again, when I first started writing, I was producing written match reports for Ospreys, obviously in South Wales, the rugby club, and then carried that on into university and sort of just did broad journalism. So I was working for one newspaper which worked hyper locally. It was called the Top Magnet, no longer exists now, but their sort of idea was that there was a sort of deficit of knowledge in the sort of Port Talbot area, and this had an impact on people's ability to vote and be part of a sort of the sort of political sphere with the knowledge they needed to participate, really, which is why that sort of paper got set up and founded. And I got involved with a very good editor there called Dr. Rachel Howells, who's now a poet. But that sort of gave me my sort of early fledgling opportunity to sort of dip my toe in writing. And that carried on then.
I'll be honest with you, Nick. This was all a secret conspiracy to have Rachel Howells on as my next guest. So I'm glad that you did that.
There's a lovely little touch point there. I'll plug that in anyway. Yeah, so that was the early days, really. But the sort of science aspect came in when I was in university then, really.
Well, I can relate to it because I sort of fell into writing about public health. And for those who don't know, Nick and I work together from time to time writing about public health. But that's entirely unconnected to this podcast. Nick is only my guest because I think he's good looking. But when I start, in all seriousness, when I started sort of writing about public health, it was very much accidental. It certainly wasn't what I was envisioning for myself at the time. And then I just think it's kind of a pattern, a groove that you set into.
Mm.
And
did you ever think of it as something you'd be passionate about then? Because that, for me, I knew up until the point where it sort of turned, I didn't have any sort of interest at all. It was just something that was almost background noise in terms of media coverage for me, which is really strange to say now. I love it so much.
I used to want to be a doctor. When I was younger, I wanted to be a doctor.
Mm.
And then when I was in secondary school, biology bored the shit out of me. And I thought, yeah, medicine, becoming a doctor, that's not for me. Because I didn't hate biology, but it just, it wasn't something that I felt passionate about. English literature and language, by comparison, that was something that I enjoyed and I engaged with. And when there was this overlap of science in terms of public health and English language and writing and whatnot, in terms of covering it, then I was like, yes, this is how I can apply that original desire to be a doctor, because I never made the connection before. I thought English has to be you write Wuthering Heights or you take a hike. Whereas here I'm like, okay, I can actually, reconcile these two things.
Mm.
So yeah, I get that.
No, that makes perfect sense.
You're also very interested in the environment.
I am. That sort of came at the same time as my sort of
Well,
public health interest.
Well, I couldn't get Greta Thunberg, so I had to settle for you.
The pound shop version. Neith's answer to it.
I'm joking. I haven't asked Greta Thunberg. No, but like that interests me, to be honest with you, like because I remember being subjected to an inconvenient truth.
Oh yeah.
In I can't remember which science class. That's how much an impression it made on me. But how did that kind of confluence, that sort of link between public health and the environment, come to be for you in your writing and your interests?
Yeah, well, again, it stems back from my second year university. So I had a lecturer called Dr. Andy Williams, and he sort of specialised in science communication, science media, and health. And in that sort of, it might have been 4 or 5 months I was taught by him, we sort of covered everything from the breadth of MMR to all different public health stories, and then back all the way across to sort of environmental coverage, where we were looking at PR, AstroTurf groups, greenwashing, and it just all sort of stoked an interest, but more the sort of environmental side more than anything. And from there, that's where sports journalism sort of kicked the bucket, and then I sort of refocused, really, if that makes sense, and went on to do my research then around sort of climate change coverage and the summit talks, really, and it just sort of took off, really. But again, like yourself, it was never something that I thought, oh, this is where I want to be heading, because when I was doing biology, chemistry, physics, or even touching on it in A levels, I never thought, oh, this has some sort of application to environmental science and things like that. It didn't stoke any interest in me.
And this is a natural path for me. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I found my calling. When I was doing my college A levels, my ambition was to be, well, the first president of the glorious Republic of South Wales, but still, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, it's obviously. I wonder how often people do fall into health and public health and sort of scientific topics by accident. I do wonder that.
From a sort of communications and journalistic perspective, where I was coming from, the sort of module that really kicked it off for me, I remember whether my year group was, for example, just say 100 students, I think it was maybe like only 5% that ended up taking that course. And we were almost having like almost one-to-one tuition. So from that perspective, then the amount of people that go from taking journalism to specifying and narrowing down into that sort of niche is probably quite small. Well, based on that one example, it must be quite small, but there must be, obviously, like you said, people who fall into it.
I mean, of the careers that I thought that I would aspire to.
Mm.
When I said president of South Wales, but but that was a joke. But I mean, I thought it would be. I thought at one point the only career I'm ever going to have is a priest.
So went from priest to doctor
No, but
to
no doctor came first.
oh right.
Priest was much later. I thought priest, writer, or well, I did think about politician, but public health was. I thought when I realised I'd be a terrible doctor because as I said, it bored me, and I thought obviously if you're going to be a doctor, you've got to commit to.
Mm.
But I thought the only way I'm ever going to be involved in public health would be as a doctor, a nurse, or something in the healthcare work profession. And I didn't really I didn't consider the fact that there's something else in that. Um, but it's mad the paths that life takes you on.
Well, I think it's an incredibly interesting time to be working on it from our perspective in terms of
Of the
sort of
pandemic.
even wider than that, of course, but especially this year more than any, and no doubt it's going to follow into next year and the coming years as this unravels.
Well, I'm hoping actually, and I've got to obviously be very, very careful how I phrase this, but I'm hoping that this continues in the sense that people continue to talk about health,
Mm.
especially.
I think
Yeah, no, up to you, please.
no, thanks, Kerean. I think one of the things that's come of it is perhaps wider understanding of the sort of processes as well, with how it's been covered more. So, for example, the percentage of the population that maybe understood how vaccines worked, or
Mm.
how clinical trials worked,
Mm.
or
Uh,
one of the things is how to protect yourself, which has probably come of this.
and also in terms of the environment as well.
Mm.
We saw air pollution levels decrease in the
Yes.
earlier stages of the pandemic, and the fact that we're like, that's possible.
Yeah.
We can bring the pollution levels down. That's a miracle. So it's
Mm.
not a miracle. A miracle is something outside of your control. This is something that's always been achievable. And then also people like, oh, maybe we need to pay more attention now to chronic diseases, mental health issues,
Mm.
run of the mill infectious diseases, for want of a better expression.
Mm.
Oh, we need to address those. Yeah, you need to address them now. You've needed to address them for like decades.
Mm.
That's why I hope it continues.
I think there's many positive things that probably could be taken from the lockdowns, the pandemic, and whether COVID is a catalyst for those will sort of be seen in the next 5 or so years. But again, like you said about mental health, that's obviously definitely come to the fore with people who are perhaps struggling to deal with lockdown after lockdown and periods of isolation. And I know that like you said as well, with the decreasing levels of pollution, obviously for when the original lockdowns came in March, obviously transport levels dropped travel dropped, those things all came down dramatically. And from the sort of echo chambers that I sort of follow on social media, etc., what they were just pushing was the fact that obviously, like things like aviation, they're so widespread and there's such a cultural norm that when you do turn them off, you do see these changes, but those things are just so deeply embedded that it takes something like a global pandemic to
Highlight to people.
highlight it. Yeah.
But, and I think that one of the things as well that I do hope is like a lasting lesson in this pandemic is inequality along I think along pretty much every line. Lines of gender, race, ethnicity, and class. Because, you know, I mean, the conversation I'm following at the moment is about the vaccine, and it's not about, you know, when am I gonna get it. You know, obviously I'm not invincible. I'm not immune to getting COVID-19. Far from it. You know, nobody is. But, you know, I'm young enough. I know that I'm not at the top of the priority list for this vaccine, but it's the fact that there are countries, high income countries, which have stockpiled doses of COVID vaccine. And then there are the lower income countries where they're scrambling. And that the countries that are scrambling are the countries where there's a higher risk that a person will have a respiratory illness, will have a condition such as HIV, for example, tuberculosis, malaria, that will make them more vulnerable to, if they were to contract COVID, they would have a severe case. And those countries also have increasing rates of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. And I really do genuinely hope that this pandemic highlights to people the fact that we can't have this inequality in global health. I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. I'm not, you know, I'm not saying this from some Marxist, Leninist, communist point of view. I'm saying this, it just makes sense. You shouldn't have to live based on where you live.
Luck of the draw.
Exactly.
I think one of the things, well, two things that sort of stand out to me there, Kerean, is sort of one, again, from my perspective and my sort of interest is, like you're saying, how public health disproportionately affects low middle income countries and how those need to be taken care of. It's the exact same narrative in climate science, in environmental science, and you'll see you know, smaller nations that will struggle to deal with it because of their capital, etc. Those are the ones which are going to bear the burden. And when these two things sort of marry together, for example, in some countries, you know, parts of India where you'll see smog levels, etc., when that combines with a disease which affects you, it affects you in your cardiovascular system, like COVID, then it underlines the need for these countries to be supported in terms of their public health. And then the sort of second point is in terms of the sort of pharmaceutical distribution of the the hoped vaccines. It's nice to see that the University of Oxford and the AstraZeneca vaccine is hoped to be distributed quite fairly based on their sort of model, and sort of moving away from the sort of traditional narrative that people have of big pharma and their sort of the idea that they're just out there to make money. So it's quite nice to see that has perhaps taken the fall with the sort of pandemic.
Absolutely. Because it's the inequality that I think probably provokes my most emotional, my most visceral reaction when I write about health or I interview somebody like yourself about health. It's when it gets to the inequality and I'm like, God.
Yeah.
Mighty.
I think the sort of tiered system for the vaccine distribution has been done quite sensibly, to be honest.
I think so as well. But I worry it's the vaccine hoarding that I obviously, I think we both. It's the vaccine hoarding. I think Canada has enough now for the time that we're recording this to vaccinate their population 5 times over, and I think it's, if there's anything to take away from the pandemic, from my perspective, it's we need public health to be addressed globally in a way that's equal, or at the very least equitable.
I think on a sort of national level, in a good example is, I'm not too sure if this did come up in the news, I'm not too sure if you've seen it, is New Zealand's distribution of the vaccine. They themselves had agreed to provide the vaccine free of charge to every citizen in the country, but also agreed to cover the cost for some of the surrounding nations, be it Tonga, Samoa, and the Pacific Islands, which is nice to see in terms of not hoarding and being supportive of nations that are perhaps smaller than themselves, where they may not be able to stand on the world stage, on the global stage.
Exactly. Nick, always lovely to talk to you.
No, it's been a pleasure. An absolute pleasure.
Before I let you go, because I promised this earlier, and
oh no,
it's the Christmas quiz.
I'm sitting worried.
No, it's all right. The 3 softball questions.
Okay.
Because I've had to endure, because I'm a massive fan of Doctor Who. I've had to endure 2 Doctor Who quizzes on this podcast, one of which was my fault because I arranged it, and the other one wasn't. This is my final recording of the year, my final recording before Christmas. I just wanted to ask you 3 very basic questions. Question 1, favorite Christmas film? And you can ask me the same question back if you want to.
Ooh. Home Alone 2. What's yours?
The one with Donald Trump.
The one with Donald Trump making a fleeting appearance. I'm about to be cut tonight.
The first MAGA hat. I was just making a note. Witts.
Blacklisted.
You're never coming back on you again, buddy. Okay. Mine is gotta be It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, nice.
Favorite Christmas story?
Ooh. Well, that's a question now. don't know. I'm not too sure on that one, Kerean.
Films don't count.
Yeah, that's where I'm struggling, yeah.
Okay, fine. I'll just make a note. Nick Witts doesn't read except when it's his own.
What's yours then?
Mine's a tie. Mine's a tie between A Christmas Carol
Mm-hmm.
and The Gift of the Magi. You know, the one with the one of them buys the other a harmonica, and they basically buy each other presents that they can't use because they've sold. Yeah, you know, people can Google it. Okay, you can just say yours is the Bible.
Is there a stock answer? Is that the stock
Yeah,
answer?
well, it would officially be mine. I don't want to put people at a disadvantage. As a Christian, I've got to say that my favorite Christmas story is the Gospel of Luke, but which it kind of is. Okay, fine. Favorite Christmas song?
Ooh, are we going sort of charts, or are we going carols? What are we doing?
Well, if you've got two of each, if you've got one of each,
oh, now you're asking.
give me one of each, and I'll give you one of each.
Unashamedly, Fairy Tale of New York.
That's your favorite charts one, okay?
Yeah, and carol. God, it's been years since I heard a carol.
You heretic.
I'm not so sure. Give me yours.
Okay, my favorite carol is "O Come All Ye Faithful." My favorite charts one, unashamedly, is "Fairy Tale of New York."
Good. At least we have some alignment.
What about Silent Night? Say Silent Night.
I do actually like "O Come All Ye Faithful," but I haven't heard it in
we'll go for
absolutely years.
We'll go for total alignment.
Perfect. Perfect.
Nick, lovely. Thank you so much for being here.
No, it's been a pleasure once again, Kerean. Thank you very much.
Very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. You heretic. I look forward to talking in the new year, and hope to have you back on sometime. It's been absolutely lovely.
No, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much, and have a happy Christmas and a happy New Year yourself. Merry Christmas, should I say?
Thank you very much. Give my love to your loved ones and to my viewers and their loved ones. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I'll see you in 2021, I hope. But stay safe. Give a bit to charity, whatever you can afford. And join us next year, won't you? See you, everyone.